a lot. Even before I got to the city, they were already funding the Best Foot Forward program at Bike Walk Central Florida. When I was at the state, actually I think I may have been, when I was with BHP, I became the chair of Bike Walk Central Florida, and I've been the chair for about 8 years now. And so they've done a good job of helping the city with the Best Foot Forward program, and we're hoping to get those funds increased. They now include Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties. I mentioned before the federal highway training, because Florida is a focus state for safety because of the problems that we have here. Federal highway has been for the last 2012, so 7 years, has been providing these courses to the local governments and the DOT around the safety programs. And you can see these 4 courses are courses that I brought Federal Highway in, and instead of just providing training to the city of Orlando, because the district by design issue is a metropolitan area, it's Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties. I offered the training to Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties and the DOT to try to deal with the issue as a region instead of just for the city of Orlando. And I was very grateful because they have all sent people to these training classes to get their act together as well. And then some of the things that we're working on in the coming years is that we've got to work on land development and street network. We, outside of the traditional city, we don't require adequate street network, and I'll talk about why that's a problem. And also, we're going to be more focused on integrated land use and transportation. The transportation industry, at least from the state perspective, historically has said, well, we can't do anything about land development, so we just throw up our hands and focus on widening roads. And so there are things that can be done differently. Part of the initiative that I led at the state through the Complete Streets effort was to start rewarding the right behavior by local governments to do things differently. And I was able to work with the city of Sarasota, Bayou Springs, the city of Lakeland, and some other cities in District 1 to start doing things differently. In fact, I had the city of Lakeland killed a 690 project that they would have done if I had not worked with them for several years. And the city of Bonita Springs eliminated an interchange project that we were already doing a study on. So they got it. And then again, using basically the DOT's approach at the city, doing a context-based approach to street design, and then working on improving network density. So probably a lot of you have seen this slide. I've been using it for a long time, and probably most of you understand what's been happening. Since World War II, we've separated land uses and cul-de-sac developments onto the state and federal system because local governments could get free money from the feds to widen the roads, and then local governments didn't have to take care of the travel demand created by these types of development patterns. And contrasting that with the bottom half, which is more like Baldwin Park, where you both had mixed uses and you had a dense network of streets. And while people will still drive in this condition, especially at this time of year, they have lots of ways to get around. It doesn't put all the travel demand on the limited network of streets. So this is something I've been preaching to local governments for 7 years. And this is a good example of that. This happens, probably some of you know, this happens to be in Orange County. I stole this from Streets blog a few years ago. These 2 homes right here, the back doors are about 70 feet apart, and it's a 7-mile drive from front door to front door. And the thing is that, this doesn't just have an impact to someone that may want to go from house A to house B. From a local government standpoint, and being there now, if we go in to provide services to communities like this, like repairing stormwater lines or that sort of thing, if the problem goes from one neighborhood to the other, then our service folks now have to drive all the way around. And I can tell you from working with fire departments across the country, House A could be fully involved in a fire that would then trigger over into House B because they're so close together. And now they've got to send trucks all the way around because there's no connectivity between these neighborhoods. And this has impacts on services like UPS and other delivery services and other services like lawn care. I mean, it's increasing the cost to everybody, and the only cost to fix this problem at the local government level is political will. And I always use Baldwin Park. I've seen a lot of people there over the years. And primarily, of course, it has mixed use, but it also has 32 street connections to the adjacent network. And so I go through Baldwin Park a lot, even though I live in downtown. And you don't see the kind of congestion in Baldwin Park because there's so many ways to get in and out. There's no 4-lane roads in Baldwin Park, and there are no signals within Baldwin Park, just on the outside roads. So this is what we've got to promote more of. So, so the city has done some things right, but we need to do better throughout the entire area that the city has annexed in. One of the other things that we did, we were selected by the Complete Streets Coalition shortly after I came on board at the city to take part in 3 demonstration projects, us and 2 other cities. We selected Curry Ford Road because we knew we had a crash problem. I don't know if you noticed, 25% of the crashes in District 2 are on Curry Ford Road. And so we selected a segment of Curry Ford Road, and we used tape to basically road diet Curry Ford Road from 5 lanes down to 3, which allowed us to put bike lanes in. People thought we were doing this just for the bicycles. No, this was about speed reduction. This wasn't just about bicycles, but we needed to use that space for something other than cars. Unfortunately, we had some bad behavior out there, which if we had more time to do this project, I think we would have seen much less of an issue, but we had less than 3 months to do this project, collect data for a month, and turn in our results. So we were on a very compressed schedule. We couldn't do the kind of public outreach that we did, for example, working on Corinne Drive, and we didn't have the time to do the kind of an engineering analysis to mitigate signal timing and things of that nature. From my perspective, it was a very successful project. None of my team had ever worked on a road diet because the last road diet the city did, excuse me, was Edgewater Drive, and that was about 20 years ago. So I wanted them to learn what was involved, and we learned a lot from this. We did have a lot of pushback, but when we polled the outcome of the project, we had 40% in favor of the project and 60% not in favor. I can tell you from my time at DOT, you don't usually get as much as 40% in favor. And much of the opposition came from outside the neighborhoods, people commuting in from Avalon Park and further south on Conway. And from my perspective, this was not only about getting speeds down on Curry Ford Road, but if we were to do this permanently, it's also to reduce the cut-through traffic on Bundy and Primrose and Crystal Lake, all of which are neighborhood streets. If this same traffic was going through those cul-de-sac neighborhoods outside the city limits, those people would be raising hell about the traffic within their neighborhoods. But of course, they were complaining because their commute was increased by around a minute to a minute and a half. We had people driving this corridor during the peak times. Of course, the first couple of days were rough, but we had people driving these corridors almost every day during the whole 30 days, and the average delay was about a minute and a half. It's less than a mile. And in spite of what people were telling us, it was taking 30 to 45 minutes to get through the bridge. And oh, by the way, we had yield rates in the 40% range at this crossing with no traffic control other than the tech sign. We didn't have a rectangular rapid flashing beacon or anything else, so it was definitely helpful. We've also, we had about a year and a half where we could not use rectangular rapid flashing beacons. It's one of the most effective tools for mid-block crosswalks because the flashing, the high-intensity flashing beacon can be seen from like a mile away. And so it gets drivers' attention that someone's about to step into the crosswalk, and you've probably seen some of these, but there was a patent lawsuit that kept us from installing these for about a year and a half, but we're now putting them in. Yes, sir?
Yeah, hey Billy, quick question. So I know it's a big, we have a big industrial area down on Mercy Drive, and I know at least one pastor that has his church there, and he was complaining about truck traffic. I don't know if anything that the city's kind of working on to make sure that the streets feel safer, because I know there's the housing developments on both sides.
I don't know that we've gotten any specific, I don't know offhand if we've had specific complaints, but if they reach out to our engineering division, we can look at those issues.
Hey, Billy?
Yes.
Have you seen the mid-lock crossings on Marco Island where they use flashing LEDs in the roadway, pedestrian
I haven't
approaches?
seen them there, but I've seen them elsewhere. They don't work very well because as soon as the car's in the way, they can't be seen by the drivers behind them, and they're a huge maintenance problem. They have not held up well. There's some by Highland, by the Academy over in, I just thought the Academy. Thank you. And they didn't hold up very well. They
Thank
don't
you.
hold up very well. So you're going to be seeing more of the rectangular flashing beacons. We've just put them in at the corner of Washington and so forth. This is Mercy Drive, which is one of our problem corridors from the safety standpoint. So these are the other projects that we've got going on. We've already started doing the study for Primrose for a mosaic and a rectangular rapid flashing beacon from the between the Academy and the Links Transfer Center, because there's a lot of pedestrian activity. And then we're going to be working on our Vision Zero high injury network. So then I'll talk about a couple of projects that we've already got in the planning and concept development stages. We're just about done with the analysis on the north quarter. So from Colonial up to Lake Ivanhoe, we've done a study that evaluated the conversion of Magnolia and Orange Avenue from one-way to two-way. We're good with it. We could do it tomorrow. The DOT required us to do a more detailed analysis because they have some concerns that it might back up the I-4 improvements that they're making right now. I'm not concerned that they will, but we had to do that on their behalf. So this is what the condition is today, and that's what it could be in the future. Including, we've got another project that includes putting a side path for the bicyclists on the west side. And the other one is Robinson Street. My division manager for transportation engineering, Chris Cairns, actually proposed this project when he was at DOT, and I was the secretary in District 1. All of you are familiar with Robinson Street, obviously. These are 9.5 foot lanes, and this has a much higher crash rate for the volumes than it should. And so that's why the district actually proposed evaluating the road. Excuse me. And so these are the concepts. We've actually put together the funding in the capital projects program to fund the reconstruction of Robinson Street from Garland all the way to Mills. So in the central business district, and I forgot to switch this slide out, we actually have a cycle track on the, this is one of the concepts that we evaluated with parking on the north side and then shared lanes. We actually have a cycle track on the south side and no parking on the north side. So it's a 3-lane section with a cycle track on the south side. Very much like what you see. This is the Lake Eola district. We had 4 districts here because the context changes. So the cycle tracks on the park side, and you can see here offices on the left.
Billy, could you speak up a little bit?
Pardon?
Speak up a little
Of course.
bit.
Please.
Thank you, Laura. And then when we go into the neighborhood district, so at higher, the cross-section changes, and we haven't, the DOT doesn't have this segment programmed yet, so that will stay 4 lanes for a while, but we're looking at going to 3 lanes in that section as well. The volumes are higher once you cross Mills. As you go east, and then in the Milk District, where the volumes drop off, we're proposing on-street parking on the south side, which is where all the businesses are, because you've got the dairy on the left. And so that's it.
Generally, in those cross sections where you have 3-lane sections, kind of the volume where you get it.
They're in the low 20s. They're within the range of what DOT would allow. And if it was my decision unilaterally, I would make it happen, because we get a lot of people avoiding the 408, and people's traffic patterns will change over time. You'll get outcry in the middle. At the University of Tennessee, they were diving a road with 30,000 volumes.
Arlington regularly did it.
Yeah. it's a no-brainer at that level. And I think one thing that would help is the section between Mills and Crystal Lake is a modern roundabout at Mills, because most of the delay on any of our corridors is caused by signals, right? You can spend 2 minutes at a signal because of the signal timing, which is another thing we're working on. We've got to do a better job at the city of working on things that will change driver behavior. And long signal cycles don't help at all. So that's what's up. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of emphasis on the major projects and kind of revitalization of different segments of roadways and stuff with this sales tax, which I think is great. But I run and bike a lot, and there's a lot of sidewalks, just simple sidewalks and curb cuts that don't exist, and aprons that need to be installed, just real fundamental infrastructure improvements that need to be made. Is the tax can be used for things like that too?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just talking about the Vision Zero element.
Gotcha.
We've already done inventories on our sidewalks. We're developing a plan for setting priorities for filling those gaps. We're updating our bike plan, and so our bike plan is completing the Orlando, what may be called the loop, it's called the Beltway right now. And so we have a heavy focus on bike infrastructure in addition to the sidewalks and safety issues. Yes, Pete?
I have a question about just sort of the strategy to get the referendum passed. And the question goes like this. As I've watched these things happen in other urban areas,
Yep.
what typically seems to go down is that the people that live in the city and are dealing with the conditions that you're showing here,
Yep.
they all vote for it.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot more people that live out in the county,
Yep.
and they all get a vote too.
Places
And
like
they don't care.
Apopka and Winter Garden.
And so the question becomes, like, so as an example, if you think of like, the last round of transit, the transit thing in Hillsborough County. I mean,
Sure.
everybody living in the city of Tampa wanted it.
Yep.
Everybody in Hillsborough County is like, why do I care?
Exactly.
So what's the strategy to make these things relevant? Make the need for this relevant to people that aren't necessarily living in, in urban conditions?
Sure. So the county is leading this effort, but my expectation is they're meeting with Hillsborough County here shortly. But I would expect that they've got to have something in it for those suburban rural areas, or else it won't go anywhere.
Exactly. I mean, I think they have to be really serious about that,
Yep.
or it won't go anywhere.
Exactly. So funding, it will allow us to increase funding to links, which will help support
Right.
your route optimization study, implementing the route optimization study. And the funding will help us to increase service on Sunrail. Those are two big focuses, but obviously there's going to have to be some capacity projects in for this more suburban and rural parts of the
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's got to be a story out there.
Bill, if I can steal a little bit of your thunder, ULI is certainly a great partner for that as well.
Good.
ULI, AIA, AICP, I mean, all of our professional organizations. Warren and I were talking earlier too about, how maybe even being part of.
I mean, just to
process
pick
as
something out of the
well.
air, I mean, there's got to be a story to go out to,
It's educational.
Ocoee and Winter Garden and
Exactly.
say, here's what we can do, whether it's the bike trail or here's, in Oviedo, here's what we can do to improve quality of life in Oviedo.
Well, one thing that I think should be looked at is putting in more adaptive signal systems. So that helps everybody. So adaptive signal systems don't do a whole lot when roads are fully saturated. But during the off-peaks, they allow the traffic, instead of having traffic signals timed for certain times of day and then they're fixed, the signals adapt based on the traffic volumes at the intersection in real time. And so they're very expensive, but if I was leading it, that's what I'd be pushing.